Welcome back! My name is Baller Scuba. This is Video Games Over Time. We are still in 1982, and today we're going to talk about Zaxxon. The history of Zaxxon takes us to Sega. We have mentioned Sega previously on Video Games Over Time. We briefly mentioned Sega in our Pac-Man video as they created a similar game named Head On. Sega was also the publisher of Frogger in Japan. With the release of their own game, it's time to talk about the history of Sega. The history of Sega goes back to three men. The first man is Irving Bromberg, a Jewish-American businessman who established the Irving Bromberg Company in 1931. This company became a big name in coin-operated machine distribution. In 1940, Irving Bromberg, his son, Marty Bromley, and family friend James Humpert formed Standard Games, a company that distributed coin-operated amusement machines to U.S. military bases abroad during World War II. After World War II ended in 1946, the three men formed Service Games to replace both Standard Games and its successor, California Games. Service Games, or Sega for short, purchased slot machines from the U.S. Army, repaired them, and sold them. Through some legal issues, including the United States making slot machines illegal in their territories, as well as accusations of bribery and tax evasion, Service Games would continue to grow, forming and dissolving several subsidiaries along the way. Service Games would also expand operations into several different countries around the world. One country in particular where Service Games proved influential and successful was Japan. In the mid-1960s, Sega, now operating as Sega Enterprises Limited, began focusing on distributing coin-operated amusement machines publicly instead of leasing their machines to military bases. In particular, Sega would import jukeboxes, pinball machines, and gun games into Japan. As time went on, Sega found themselves manufacturing replacement parts for these machines, so the company shifted towards manufacturing their own machines. In 1965, Sega released the first coin-operated machine they manufactured, Periscope. Periscope is an electromechanical submarine simulation game that was designed by Sega as well as the Nakamura Manufacturing Company, which would later be known as Namco. In 1969, Sega was sold to American conglomerate Gulf and Western Industries. Just 1 year later, in 1970, Sega began opening arcades, including a 125-game arcade in Sapporo, Japan, and a 70-game arcade in Nagasaki. This would expand into North America by 1975, when existing arcades previously owned by Kingdom of Oz started becoming Sega Centers. In 1980, Sega even opened their own version of a Chuck E. Cheese, known as PJ Pizzazz. Around this time, Sega started manufacturing their own video games as well. In 1979, Sega purchased Gremlin Industries, an arcade game manufacturer. Gremlin and Sega would release Head On that year, which we briefly mentioned in our video on Pac-Man. Sega would also publish Frogger in 1981, which became their best seller. We of course talked about Frogger in its own video. In 1982, Sega released Zaxxon. The game's development is one where most information is in question. Little is known about its development for sure. Zaxxon is an isometric shooter. Isometric refers to the angle at which the game is viewed as well as its spatial projection. It simulates an angled perspective on a three-dimensional space. Zaxxon was the first game to use this perspective, which is a type of axonometric perspective. The name Zaxxon comes from axonometric projection. The player's goal is to fly through 2 different fortresses, fighting enemies while avoiding being shot down or running out of fuel. At the end of the second fortress is a boss for the player to fight, coming in the form of a Zaxxon robot. The release date of Zaxxon is one that is not clear either. Zaxxon's release date seems to have been sometime between December 1981 and April 1982, with January 1982 seeming to be the most likely release date for the game. Zaxxon, however, is known for being the first video game to be advertised on television. Paramount Pictures produced the commercial for $150,000, over $415,000 in 2021. That is the backstory of Sega and the brief history of Zaxxon. With that now told, it's time to play the game for ourselves. And here we are in the game. This is Zaxxon. As you can see, as I probably hinted at before, the perspective is different, but it is one that we're going to get used to. Zaxxon has quite the bad title screen, if I'm being honest. But this is a perspective we have not seen. It is one that we are going to have to get used to, but it is one that I do struggle with. Add that to the fact that I normally struggle with shooters, and you have a recipe for disaster for me. But we will try to see what we can do. We first started in the fortress that we saw earlier, then we go into this space battle with the enemy planes. As you can see, a lot of our ways of seeing how high we are and where we are on the map kind of go away in this perspective. There is an altimeter of sorts on the left. It'll tell you your height, high and low. Everything is reversed when it comes to that, so you hold down to pull up and go higher, and then you press forward to go down, to go lower. And then, of course, there is a shadow that will show up when you're in the fortress, but that does go away in the little space battles. There's the shadow there. It'll show you how to die by hitting yourself into a brick wall in space. All right, let's go ahead and drop quarter in and see what we can do. All right, we want to be as high as possible here. Okay, then we're going to want to drop down. This is how you get the points. You head down here and you just start pounding away at the fire buttons. See what you can do. A lot of the cannons will not shoot at you too often, but they always seem to point at the worst time. Don't know how I missed the other plane. You might notice that there are planes that are kind of grounded here. How did I miss that? If you destroy those, they won't attack you later. There honestly seems to be a strategy where you can... we're going to have to raise up here. Where you can die. That was not high enough? Figured for sure that was high enough. If you die at that point, you can see I have a chance to go back and kill planes. If you had killed them before, they would be there again, and you can get rid of them again. And lower the number of enemy planes. So now there's only 12 because I died a couple times before. Okay, now once again, I'm having trouble gauging where I am compared to where they are. You can hear the beeps every once in a while. That is when we are lined up for a kill shot. But as you can see, it doesn't mean that I'm going to get a kill shot, and then they will get a kill shot on me from time to time. All right, not the worst that I've done, but also not the best. I did practice a little bit earlier. You can't use up and down on this menu, but we'll go ahead and enter that. And they do have a rub here. That's basically your backspace. So I got 5th place. We'll see if I can't do better than that. I think I can, but I can also do a lot worse than that. Make sure I'm in the right spot there, and then get into things. Yeah, they do launch these rockets at you. My thought on it is to stay away from those as soon as you see it going, because there is a very good chance that you will not hit the rocket when you're firing at it. Can I hit that one? Thank you. All right, climb, climb, climb. All right, so as you can see, because I didn't die, there's now going to be 15 planes coming at me. because I only took out 5 on the fortress. Now you don't have to beat them all, right, as we saw in the demo, but it is difficult to really gauge when you're going to get hit. So far I'm doing alright. I seem to have found kind of a sweet spot where they come up, and that's doing good things for me. And we're down to 4, and we're on to the next fortress. Second fortress is a lot more difficult. We're going to have to gauge kind of perspectives a lot better on this one, and that is already a struggle for me. Alright, we made it through that. Okay. There. I don't know how I'm doing this right now. Up, up, there. Okay. Right there. So far, so good, but I have to keep an eye on several different things in order to make that happen for me. Okay, so far, so good. We made it to the bot. We made it to the boss, the Zaxxon robot. Well, that's not fun. Am I not hitting him here? I don't know how to avoid that. I legitimately don't know how to avoid that right now. It's honing in. I thought I'm shooting it. That should do something for me, but apparently not. Alright, game over. I died to that. Maybe I wasn't shooting it fast enough. That one's hard for me to gauge. What was the issue there? Alright. We're done. Initials entered. I got second place, very close to first place. I think I got one more run in me. Don't think I'm going to do better than what I did. I have never beaten that robot. Just haven't beaten it. It is a difficult robot. And I haven't figured out how to get past those missiles. Shooting them doesn't seem to work because I definitely hit it multiple times. That's the first time that one's ever shot at me. Yeah, the robot, it's just not something that I've been able to do. Of course, if you beat it, doesn't mean it's a game over by any means. Alright, 15 planes. Once again, I got all 5 that they had for me there. And I believe that I have made, well, probably not anymore. I normally would have made the high score list with what I have now, but we will see what that means kind of later on. If I hang out here, I can get quite a bit of them. This seems to be the sweet spot right around here. Although I swear sometimes I'm hitting right and he's going down. But that's a whole different thing. Okay. Through here, let's see what I can do here. So far, so good. Keeping an eye on the altimeter very closely. And I'm gauging where I am based on when I'm shooting the wall. And now I'm very close to being out of fuel. Alright, I got some more fuel. Shot some more fuel. Seriously. Alright, well I was able to get a new high score. Yeah, just kind of gauging where I am based on all my shots here. So that seems to be in the clear. Alright, now it's time to fight the robot again. You can see that I hit it. It changed colors when I shot it. Okay. I was able to get past that one. Congratulations, I get 200 points. Good. And I have beaten Zaxxon, apparently. I have beaten the 2 fortresses. I beat the robot. It didn't seem like I did much to deserve that, but I will take it, and we're on a second run. I'm going to call that a victory, and we are calling that a day. My secret seemingly was to start shooting the missile before it got fired. that seemed to be the trick. Just go for it as soon as it showed up on the screen. All right, so there we go. First place, over 10,000 points. I'm going to call that a victory, and I think that is going to do it. So with the game now played, let's talk about how it holds up today. Playing the game today, although apparently I was decent at it, it still felt a little stilted to me. It felt a little odd, felt a little off somehow. The perspective is kind of the big selling point of this game, and although it is cool to bring a new way of looking at a shooter, it kind of was a detraction for me because it takes a lot to try to figure out what you're shooting at based on the perspective that you're at. It's difficult to kind of gauge where your plane is versus where enemy planes are, especially in that space stage, but also compared to where the cannons are in the fortress. You can gauge where it is, but you have to look at multiple spots, which takes your eyes off the enemy and what's going on inside the game. So it takes a lot of practice to get over that initial learning curve of where you are. Somehow I was able to do that today. Kind of get over that initial learning curve to at least be able to beat the boss, which was a little awkward because it seemed like he just kind of walked away and therefore I won. I feel like I didn't do it as well as I could have as a result of that. But the game is fun. It's fun, I would say, in shorter bursts because there is not a lot to the game. There's really just the 2 stages and then you kind of recycle it. Then you're just kind of back to square one. So there's not a lot to it. I don't feel that this game has a lot of staying power as a result. It doesn't look like it's going to be that different moving forward. So I don't think it's necessarily a game that I would come back to because it is so short. But overall, I would say the graphics and the perspective are the main selling points. It does feel like you are traveling somewhere, you're defeating enemies, you're accomplishing something because it is better at immersing you in the world than a lot of other games have been. And I think that the sound in particular is great. Maybe I'm just thinking that because the sound was the hardest thing for me to be able to get working. But the sound in the game is good compared to everything else that we have done. So if you don't have the sound, you're kind of missing out on a lot of it. But the graphics and sound are really good. The gameplay, I feel, is decent, I would say. It's decent for the time. We have played better shooters out there. Even something like Star Raiders, where you're in the 3-dimensional space, I would argue has a better... When you play Star Raiders, I should say, you have a better sense of where you are, what you're heading toward. Zaxxon, I have to constantly shoot to figure out where are my bullets landing. Okay, that's where I'm going. So let's raise up, let's lower, let's go left or right. Because it's hard to kind of gauge that inside the game without just constantly mashing the fire button. And then once, of course, they take the fortress away and you're in space, I'm just kind of hoping for the best. I'm looking at the altimeter, looking where I can see my ship is, and hoping that's where the enemy shows up. It's an odd game, but ultimately I would say the gameplay is the worst feature of this game, but it's decent, it's good. Of the things about this game, though, that would be the downside of this game. In terms of replayability, this is not a game that I probably would want to come back to. This is a game that I am happy that I played. I'm happy that I was able to beat the robot for the first time, but it's probably not a game that I'm going to remember later on and go, oh, I can't wait to play some Zaxxon later on. But it is worth a game, worth your time. Those first couple rounds of you playing the game until you kind of get a sense of the perspective and what you're doing. But doesn't seem like there's too much more after that, at least from my perspective. For me playing the game, there's not too much more for me to want to look at. And that is my modern take on the game. When Zaxxon was released, the game became a large commercial success in North America. It was listed as one of the top 5 highest grossing arcade games of the year. The critics were also positive on the game, particularly enjoying the game's new perspective and realism. The game was not as popular in Japan, however, although it sold decently. Zaxxon would spawn sequels and ports. In fact, the first sequel to Zaxxon would be released in November 1982, known as Super Zaxxon. Super Zaxxon would increase the difficulty and change the color scheme. It would not be as successful as Zaxxon. With a large success that they were able to develop, Sega would position themselves as a contender in the video game development field as well as publication and distribution. We will be hearing from Sega again. That will do it for the story of Zaxxon for now. My name is Baller Scuba. This has been Video Games Over Time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video when we put a bow on it.